Hi, this is Tim Donner with another edition of LNTV. Well, the polls say one thing, the bettors quite another. Indeed, while Joe Biden holds a 10-point lead in the Democratic primary race, the odds makers have made Elizabeth Warren the favorite by a growing margin. How can that be? Joining us to explain is LibertyNation.com managing editor Mark Angelides. He also doubles as our gaming analyst. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, as always. Thanks for joining. So, Mark, just to put the polls in perspective, almost all the polls at this point have the top 5 Democratic candidates beating President Trump decisively. Now, I don't think anyone expects Pete Buttigieg to be the next president, but he, for example, leads Trump by 5 points in a general election matchup. So how seriously should we actually take these polls at this point?
Well, you could take a leaf out of Cory Booker's book, who, I've got to be fair, at 66 to 1, is probably not the best person to take advice from, but he says you can't look at the polls, national polls, this far out, which is very fair because, you know, the support's spread between everybody's favorite candidate. So this is the kind of period where you're, even if you're going for somebody like, I don't know, who's on the far outside there? Well, Cory Booker, for example.
Or Julian Castro would be another one who's another one percenter.
So these people, they're not going to win the nomination. So it's a safe bet that you can cast your primary vote for them, or you can, in a national poll, you can say this is the person that I want to get behind. But in terms of should President Trump worry, not really, because these polls, they're kind of indicative of what Democrat voters would like the rest of the world to think, and that's how it really works, because they don't at present have, as you say, over your side of the pond, they don't have skin in the game. Or is that just on my side of the pond?
Do you actually use that on your side of the pond?
We do occasionally, yeah. Or we say you don't have a dog in the fight.
See, you've just now, I didn't realize that the British had actually appropriated so many American expressions. Mark, I thought it went the other way around.
Read Bill Bryson's book on the mother tongues. Very interesting. To find out which way the language has actually flown. Very interesting stuff. I'm no purist. I'm no purist.
Are you going to treat us to what the conclusion is?
The conclusion of the book?
Yes.
It's that much of the modern British English is from 1910, 1920 America.
Okay, we'll rest on that conclusion, that surprising one.
Sure. Back to Trump. President Trump really shouldn't worry too much about what the polls are saying now, because everybody's voting for their favorite candidate. And when it shows that all these candidates are beating him in a runoff, it's not really reflective of the reality, and certainly not reflective of people who have a skin in the game or dog in the fight, where they're actually putting their money where their mouth is on this. It's not reflective of that at all.
So then how much, I mean, the question remains how seriously we should take the rest of the polls, because now we're seeing a disparity between pollsters and betting odds when it comes to Biden and Warren, as we talked about at the top. Where does this difference come from? This difference between what the polls are saying and what the bettors are doing with their own money?
Well, here's the question, Tim. This is quite a disparity, and I'd like to talk about the direction this is traveling in just a moment. But I want you to first put yourself in mind. If somebody's calling you up, let's say that you're a political animal, you're crazy about politics. You're so crazy about politics, you're willing to stay on the line with somebody who's asking you questions about politics. And let's say, for another example, that you have a vested interest in getting your party elected. So let's say you're either a devout Democrat or a devout Republican or a devout independent with very strong leanings. Now, what you're going to do, and this is what many people do, is they give a stronger answer to the poll than they would give in real life. If you see what I mean, that they want to sway the polling so it reflects what they wish to happen.
I think it's also interesting to discern whether the answers that people give to pollsters are couched in terms that sort of display a skepticism as to whether the pollster is going to dislike them if they give the wrong answer.
Very much so. I mean, this is where you get the what during 2016 was called the shy Trumper, because nobody expected the amount he got. And all the polls, as you and I know, Tim, we're big poll followers. We looked at the beyond the headlines and looked deep into the crosstabs on these. And for me, even back early during the Republican primaries, I was saying Donald Trump's clearly won it. There's no way he can lose with these kind of figures. But that wasn't what the headline was saying. That's from digging down deeper into the crosstabs. If I may briefly get back to how the trend is going. Is that okay if we got time for that?
Absolutely.
So a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, because I do, as you know, I do the horse race column, as we call it, which is analyzing the political betting each week on LibertyNation.com. But about 4 to 5 weeks ago, maybe, I started noticing that Elizabeth Warren was challenging Joe Biden for the top spot in what cash money bettors are going for. And at the time, I posited the idea that if we start seeing certain areas and states going more for Elizabeth Warren, this could be the actual tipping point where it goes away from Joe Biden to Elizabeth Warren. And what we've seen in the polls is the polls are following the betting, not the other way around.
Well, you would think that as each successive progressive candidate like a Cory Booker and a Beto O'Rourke and a Julian Castro drop out, their support's not going to Joe Biden. And very little of the support of the so-called also-rans, the 15 to 18 candidates who have no shot, very little of that, it seems, would go to Biden unless the composition of the Democratic primary voter changes substantially, which we're not likely to see. Now, you care to take a guess at how this disparity that you've discussed is impacting each campaign?
Oh, sure. Well, from the Biden camp, what you'll be seeing is a lot of chatter about how Elizabeth Warren is now getting big money donors, and what they're doing is they're spreading the money around, especially in cash bets, to try and influence. You'll be here. Well, you may not hear this from the Biden camp, but this is what they're talking about. And the Warren camp will be talking about how the pollsters are personally favoring Joe Biden. This is why she's not getting the national success that she's seeing in the cash betting odds, and of course in very regional polling. And both camps will be talking about this as though they are the victim of the other campaign's machinations, would be my best guess.
It's actually quite remarkable, Mark, that in a field that started at about 25 candidates, it's now down to about 20, the Democratic primary field, that of all the candidates, including Biden and everyone else, nobody has really picked up any ground except Elizabeth Warren. Biden's where he was at the start. Harris is stuck at 7%. Bernie's been at 15, 16% steady. All the others are down at 1 or 2%. So it's really just Elizabeth Warren that seems to have excited the sensibilities of Democratic primary voters.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is, to be fair, that's more to do with the electability factor. You see, you've got a lot of people who, they don't just want to vote for the candidate that they like. They want to vote for a candidate who has at least some chance of winning. So you've got the Biden camp. They read that if they're going for, let's call it, the more moderate Democrat camp, they've got Biden to vote for. Maybe Amy Klobuchar, maybe Andrew Yang to some extent, but they're very much outsiders. So in terms of electability, that gives them Joe Biden. Whereas on the progressive wing, the more, I don't want to say extreme wing, but let's say more progressive wing of the Democratic Party, voter terms, they're really left with who can actually win an election. Now, Kamala Harris, despite a very strong start, appears to have lost all support. She's not even number one in California, which should be very concerning for her campaign. So in terms of electability, all you've got on the progressive side is either Bernie Sanders, who lost out to essentially the more moderate wing last time anyway. So he has a proven track record of losing to a moderate candidate or a moderate candidate. which leaves Elizabeth Warren, who is as yet, let's say, unchallenged and therefore has not failed. So when they're thinking about voting, they're thinking about, will my candidate win? Because everybody wants to be on the winning team. And as far as electability goes, from the vast field, that would leave Elizabeth Warren for the more progressive Democrats.
Yeah. The concept that Elizabeth Warren actually seems electable says more, I think, about the direction of the Democratic Party and how far left this field is than it does about Elizabeth Warren's actual electability. Yeah. But on the other hand, Mark, Joe Biden has hung his hat entirely on his electability, sent his wife out to say, look, you may not like him, maybe you don't think he's that good, but he's the only one that can beat Trump. And then they ran out an ad campaign saying he's the only one that can beat Trump. So he's hanging his hat exclusively on electability, which makes me wonder, what if he starts to slip in the polls? He's got nothing left to break his fall, does he?
Not really. No, I should have couched the earlier prognostication regarding Elizabeth Warren. And she is the most electable of the other progressive Democrats. That doesn't necessarily make her electable in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So yeah, Joe Biden, if he continues to slip in the polls, it's going to be a tough race for him. But I suspect that Elizabeth Warren will take a bit more of a political battering before she firms up enough to secure the nomination. It'll be a tough fight between them, and I think Biden, despite his let's say his foibles, is a bit tougher in the campaign than Elizabeth Warren. He's got a much thicker skin.
Well, we'll find out just how thick a skin Pocahontas has if she wins the nomination and faces the certainty of being mocked repeatedly by President Trump's campaign for the whole fake Indian thing and the DNA test. That'll be brought up again. But she has managed, we got to say, she has managed to change the subject well and to rise from the background 4th or 5th place into a clear 2nd place position. And I think at this point, fair to say, the leader among the progressives with a lead that's probably growing at this point. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure.
That's Mark Angelides, managing editor and gaming analyst for LibertyNation.com. If you liked this video or learned a thing or two, please like and subscribe. You can do so right down there, the bottom right corner of your screen. So that's it for another edition of LNTV. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.